All right, here we go. Showtime, Mark. Hey, AI. Mark, what are we talking about today? Hey, AI, what?
Today we are talking about interviewing.
Right.
We're talking about how we can actually use our AI agents as, in a way, as interview subjects.
Okay.
One of my favorite exercises that I always like to do in the BA training is where we simulate interviews, where we actually go through and say, okay, here are some different personas, or here are some different, various subject matter experts, conduct interviews with them. And of
Yeah.
course, they can get kind of interesting, but one of the things that AI gives you is it really gives you the ability to essentially create and have the AI agent simulate various personas. And you can interview them. Now, they tend to be, as you'll see, a little bit loquacious.
Aha,
They
this is
tend to
interesting. Okay.
give you a lot of information, which is kind of nice because that's not the way it is. People tell me, "Hey, that's not the way it is with real SMEs." That's Monday morning.
And also, it's tough when you're in a classroom trying to do this. It's tough for someone to put themselves in that persona, where the
Right.
generative AI tool automatically puts itself in that
Yeah,
persona. Are you going to show us like this is a persnickety person who has lots of detail needs?
Well, let's start off playing it rather simple, and then we're going to get into making up some kind of difficult personas.
We can actually create difficult people.
Right. Okay,
Ooh.
so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and make sure I do not hit the leave studio button.
I just did that in another session, brother. I just did it. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just did that.
Yeah, it happens. Okay, here we go. Entire screen. And that was a
little
call.
Magic. I like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was great, but that was actually Mrs. Spam Risk calling.
All
right. So here,
I'm adding it to stage.
All right. So here we go. And I'm going to go ahead and let's see, where do we have it? Right here. And I'm going to bring up, let's see, where did I have my Chat GPT? Here we go. Here's Chat GPT. I've got to detach StreamYard from it. All right. We are good to go. So we're going to use our coffee shop example. You can sort of follow along on the side and see all the different things.
So remind them of the coffee shop example again.
Yeah, the coffee shop example is something that we use in some of our BA and some of our Agile training. And here's the description that we typically present to students at the beginning when we start doing the first of the case study exercises. We're saying, this fictitious big box store chain called Green Mart has a good presence, but they want to open up their own coffee shops inside of the store. And in our case, what we want to do is we want to add the ability to order coffee onto the Green Mart app, or to build a separate app for doing that. So here we have.
I want to order my coffee using an app to get that good coffee at the Green Mart.
That's right. That's right.
And the coffee's good, okay? Right? Is it good?
Yep. So we're going to start.
Starbucks is horrible.
Oh, if we were doing the elevator pitch, which is another one of our sessions, if we were doing some of those kinds of things, one of the things we would do would be to say, hey, AI, tell me how to position myself against Starbucks.
Yeah,
maybe we could even ask that as one of the questions to our AI, simulated SMEs in a bit. Okay, so I'm going to get started. I'm going to copy this description and just sort of put that in here.
All right. So
I put nothing in there.
You're setting up Chat GTP. It's got this information now.
Right. So I've given all of that to Chat GPT. And so one of the things that Chat GPT does, if you haven't noticed this already, is even if I didn't ask it anything, I just said, here's coffee shop. Here's the problem. It's going to come back and go like a very, very helpful personal assistant. it's going to come back and say, hey, well, this is what I think we have. Okay, so it's going to give you some information. Again, we could take that on for another time. What I'm interested in at this point is, identify some stakeholders who I might want to interview as SMEs for my analysis.
You do a better job than I do with spelling.
Work.
Okay.
All right.
Let's see who the SMEs are.
Okay. So here we have customers, frontline staff,
wow,
and so
a lot
forth.
of people to interview.
One of the things that I always like about, and you keep hearing me say all the time about generative AI as an assistant in the analysis process, is it thinks a lot more broadly than even a lot of well-connected, well-knowledgeable teams. It's just going to think about, give you thoughts about, okay, we know about customers, we know about the baristas and so forth, but shift supervisors or managers, or is there a difference between shift supervisors and managers?
Yeah.
Again, that's the kind of thing which, even though I'm going after trying to identify some different profiles of some stakeholders, I don't want to lose this information. This is really good stuff. Marketing, operations, financial.
It really is. It's like, it just, because, sometimes you're not going to think about all of it. This thing just thought about all of it for you.
That's
generically, but all of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we have this. So we see here, I'm going to be interested in talking to some frontline staff.
Okay. Oh, you want to talk to the staff? Oh boy!
Right now, we could do customers. We could do the IT.
No, I like staff. Staff is cool.
Okay, so now, if you're familiar with the idea of personas go sort of one step beyond. They say, okay, here are some different instances of the same kind of actor or user or customer with different characteristics for them. So I'm going to say, give me some. Give me some personas of different frontline staff. Now, one of the things that folks who are really good with this so-called prompt engineering tell you is they say, be really specific in your prompt as to what you want. Well, yes.
And that's what you're doing right now. What you're doing is you're putting information in to get something back from ChatGPT, and we call that a prompt.
Right. All of these things that I enter down here at the bottom are called prompts. All the things it comes back with are called responses. Okay. And so here I'm saying, give me some different personas of different frontline staff. Okay. Make these as real persona definitions.
Okay. Give them the specific.
With names and, unique characteristics of each individual. Now, you might think, well, the definition of something called a persona is a well understood concept. And you might be right. I mean, I could have just simply said, give me some persona definitions of different frontline staff, period, and seen what it came up with. Right. And of course, if it didn't give me what I was looking for, I could continue prompting, having a conversation. I call this a dialogue. I could continue a dialogue. On the other hand, I kind of have been there, done that before, not only just giving this particular demonstration, but also from having, worked with various AI agents. I kind of know that where I'm going to is I want persona definitions. I want names. I want characteristics of each individual. So I'm going to put all of that into the prompt. Okay. So here we go. Here are some.
Wow, some detailed stuff.
All right. So here we go. We've got Sarah, the seasoned barista. We've got Jake, the tech savvy barista. We've got Maria, the multitasking manager. Now,
what about this? What about someone on the register? Because the baristas don't run the register.
Baristas don't run the register. Now, if I were working as a real development team, if Dave and I were working as real development team and he threw that idea out there, I would put that in right away. I mean, as if we're just continuing, to put these different people in. Okay, so here we go. We've got now Alex, the efficient cashier. Now, by the way, I'm going to bring up something that, every time we talk about, I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent rant. Every time we talk about generative AI, the issue of biases comes up. I'm just going to show you the 4 personas very quickly. And I want to see if you can see any particular biases. All right, we have
the age. I saw the age bias right off the bat.
All right.
Even so before you even asked that question, I'm like, what the? Come on, there's no old people? This thing's old people biased. That hurts.
Any semi-retired. Oops.
Magic. Sounds like Disney Magic Land. I like that.
Any semi-retired seniors.
And how would they feel?
Who might work as staff. Oh, it's got to think. It's really thinking. Okay, so here's Betty, the experienced senior cashier. All right, here we go. Okay, so again, and of course, one of the other things you can do is you can simply say any more staff.
You're good. That's a good point to see what this comes up with.
Okay, so let's go.
I like the part-time barista. That's good.
All right. We've got Emily, a dedicated morning shift supervisor. Okay, so since Emily is the last person to be presented to me, let's go in and try to actually do some of this interviewing. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to tell our agent, you are Emily, and I'm going to ask you some questions about your job and about this app. Now, by the way, there's one little trick.
Do you want to do any personality elements to Emily first? Or you want to just have it generically think about Emily as a 40-year-old person?
Well, you see here, we've got some characteristics, okay? But we could also add to that, Emily doesn't have a lot to say.
Okay.
Or what else would you think? What would you like to throw into Emily's personality?
I was looking at this and reading it. I was wondering if she might be not too technically savvy. So maybe she has a little bit of a fear of technology.
Okay. You are Emily Wilson. You are okay with your current job, but a bit not so tech savvy, and concerned that too much reliance on tech may drive away some customers.
Yeah, that's it. 15 years at the mart. She knows how to work with people. This order system, is that just going to become faceless, nameless? All right. So you set the system up. You did a prompt. Now the prompt, the information out of the prompt.
Mm-hmm. And this is very similar. By the way, I
Gave
went
you
back.
Emily, and now you're digging deep into Emily. You're saying, "Hey, ChatGTP, I want you to be Emily now."
Right, right. Now, by the way, one thing that we sometimes do, I like to do before starting to do these interviews, is to checkpoint the chat. By that I mean, now that ChatGPT and some others have the ability to what they call share a chat or fork a chat into many different threads, it gives you the ability to say, I'm going to set up some base information, and then I'm going to go off and I'm going to create a chat thread for Emily. I'm going to create a chat thread for another. And so that the knowledge from one does not pollute the other. That's a kind of a
Okay,
more advanced techie kind of thing to do. I'm going to skip that for now in the interest of time.
but you can create what we would call chat branches.
You can create branches. You can isolate the knowledge in different chat threads. Again, the idea there is so that whatever I discuss with Emily does not, say, go over to Carlos or go over
Yes,
to other
because that doesn't
others.
happen. I mean, basically, in the interviewing process, unless you bring them together, you're interviewing them one to one.
Right. Okay. So here we go. Here's Emily. And so now here, what's interesting here is it actually went through and it created a dialogue. This is a little different from what I was expecting. But then again, one of the things, by the way, just a little bit of a, hey, this is cool, and a bit of a rant at the same time,
Yeah.
is that the folks behind these generative AI agents keep changing things, keep making improvements and changes. And so what I might have done, say, and seen 2 weeks ago may not be what I'm seeing right now. So, for
Could you
example,
have put in that chat? By keep going. I'm sorry, and I got a question for you.
yeah. So, for example, here it actually produced an interview transcript. Okay. And this is interesting simply because of the fact that maybe it actually moved me along a little faster. So, in fact, if we were doing this as a group of people, I'd have, one person read it as the interviewer, another read it as Emily, with the idea being that, okay, do we see as we go through this other questions that we might want to ask?
That's
You're going to
right.
say,
But then could you have put in the prompt, I don't need any feedback? Could you have said no feedback needed?
can we do this again with just an opening?
All right.
So
you could have changed it. So because there's pros and cons, like you said, with the interview thing.
now, one of the things that I always find is really useful is you want to engage. In fact, it was kind of when I first started playing around with generative AI agents that I realized that interviewing skills, as we are BAs, how we have to interview subject matter experts, those interviewing skills will pay off really, really well when working with agents.
Yeah.
Okay. And so one of the things that I find to be really useful here is you pick up on what was said before and drill down. Now, of course, as I'll show you in a little bit, you can also ask it to simply give you, as the interviewer, a list of potential questions. You could take that list of questions, go off to another agent, and then have that other agent pretend to be that person. Get some really interesting simulated interviews and a lot of information that way before you go off and you start talking to your real subject matter experts. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So here we talk about the coffee shop
You asked her
database.
about balance. You asked her, she had that pull in there about balance. So you said, okay, why do you think there's a need for balance?
Right. Right. Okay. So, what features will enhance the sense of a high touch personal experience?
Okay. Your first interview question. All right.
Yeah.
I'll second.
And like a real person, it's thinking. Okay. Now, again, this is probably not how a real Emily would be responding. I mean, this
Yeah.
feels more like, somebody has gone to the whiteboard and produced a really good list. But, again, are these things that we want to consider? More importantly, I think, as with all kinds of discovery during a analysis process, does any of this cause you to think about something you hadn't thought about before?
Yeah.
For example, here we see implement a chat or messaging feature allows customers to communicate directly with staff members.
Mhm.
Okay. Now, does this say
birthday and special occasion celebration? I think is really neat.
Mm-hmm. Hadn't thought about it.
Nope.
Okay. Um, and again, in some cases, it's looking beyond just the app.
Yep. How do you
Okay.
do it? How do you do it? I've seen online orders that are just go and grab. I mean, there is no personal interaction. So this person's trying to puts that balance in there for sure.
Mm-hmm. How do you think you can do the regular customer recognition without it feeling forced? Gorshed.
Yeah.
And notice it figured out that gorshed is not a word. It said how feeling
that
forced.
helps me out a lot when you mentioned that it doesn't deal. It's okay with misspellings. Speeds up my process.
Yes. It's a lot better at being able to handle those kinds of things. And again, if you have a misspelling, I had a case recently where I left off an important part of a question, and the agent came back with a completely different response from what I expected, but it was actually very insightful. One of those happy mistakes, one of those cases where it's like, okay, I never would have done this intentionally, but now that I made that mistake, I've got some more information. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, we have all kinds of information that are coming up here.
Let's ask her to rate the top. So here's the thing. Look, we can't do everything, right? We have a budget. But how do you feel? What do you feel the top 2 or 3 recognition elements should be?
I'm going to open this up and just say, what are the top 2 to 5? So I take all of the questions that came back, and include all of those. Okay. So for example, all right, here's what she thinks. She says, having customer profiles, favorite orders, things
so in
like
the app, you got to have a profile. All right. That's
right.
Work. That means there's some programming work in there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So now that has 2 has nothing to do with tech.
Mm-hmm.
3 has nothing to do with tech.
Mm-hmm.
4 is tech. 5 is tech. Okay.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
It's interesting how you point that out, because those of us who have, and as you know, I still write code for a living, among other things. So, those of us who are very technically oriented will look at those things and go, well, there's nothing I can do to support that feature. But from the perspective of this particular persona, this particular person, they don't really look at the app as being distinct from their job. They look at
Yeah.
all of these things as being part of their job. And so being able to recognize and value things that are beyond the technical part of the app and to have places to put that information is really, really valuable. We're going to talk about those in some of the upcoming LinkedIn Lives that we're doing
Yeah.
in this area, because you're going to see that doing this well, you're going to get a lot more information than just, oh, here are features that need to be built into the app.
Now let's compare something. Ask her where does she think the data for the order should come to? Like, okay, so she's mentioned nothing about how do you get this information so you can actually service it. You get what I'm saying?
Not really.
So, okay, you order coffee on the app. Where does it go to for someone to actually say, okay, we got to make that coffee?
Okay. How do you envision the orders from the app coming into the store?
Yeah. And how do you distinguish that between the live orders?
Taken in person.
Mm-hmm. This is great.
I mean, you can even imagine someone having to sit there and think, that no matter how well formed all these sentences are, there's definitely a sense of, I'm thinking. And,
I'm
when
really
you have,
thinking about this one.
yeah. And so, again, ideas. Okay.
Yeah, the separate pickup station. That's what people should do. Like when I go to the smoothie shop, they don't have that. They drop the smoothies off all in the same place. And it's weird. You're like, what the heck? How about this one? And this is one drives me crazy. Is how can you tell an in-store customer that you're busy with app orders? Have you ever walked into a shop and you're the only person there, but your order takes 30 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
And you have no idea why your order is taking 30 minutes? And you think they're all a bunch of morons?
No, you just keep hearing the phone ringing and people ripping stuff off of off a receipt printer, and you go,
a receipt printer or something. And like, what's going on? Like, it happened to me at the smoothie place the other day. It's been a while, but I was like, this is odd. How come I couldn't tell that I was like 10th in order and there was only 2 people in the shop? And it did provide a negative customer experience.
I'm going to lump the drive-through in there as well, simply because of the fact that we've been places where you're in the restaurant and the drive-through seems to be the one that gets all the attention, because you know what? They measured the time it takes to do a drive-through order. They never measured the time from when a customer walks into the store.
Exactly.
Okay. And so you've got, I've pointed this out a number of times. You've got sort of, malicious compliance disincentives going on. Okay, so here we go. Again, separate roles, priorities, queue management.
Let's give a few things to think about and throw out to a person who's really debating this, right?
Okay.
Because there's nothing in there that solves the problem.
Right. So one of the things we've done, though, is so far we have looked at this purely in terms of a single individual. But, there is an interesting, I'm going to try something here. I'm going to try dictating a question, because they say that this feature is now present.
All right, you can test it. We only got a couple more minutes, so let's just do this one and then.
Okay, so
Mhm.
here I'm going to end this interview with one of my favorite questions.
You're going to dictate it though.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for your time. Period. By the way, comma, is there anything else that I should have asked you? Question mark.
Okay.
It's okay.
They were pretty good. It saved like a minute.
So again, that was always a question I used to use. I would use in person. Is there something I haven't asked you that you expected me to ask you? When I do that with an agent, it's you get so many different ideas. Related to that would have been asking the question, um, who else should I have talked to?
Mhm. So
Yeah.
before the interview, you do this. You interview a persona. At least you have an idea of where you might want to expand on, or things that you want them to drill into that they might have missed. Say, you know, what are your thoughts on this?
Hmm.
That's what I like about this. Would be, all right, now I have a backdrop, so I can interview somebody live and see, hear them, and then see if they missed anything that the bot had based on their persona, and ask them about that.
Right. Yeah. And again, the important thing here is that this doesn't replace interviewing real SMEs. This isn't just simply a training exercise for novice BAs.
Yep.
This is actually something that you can use even as an experienced BA, as an experienced person in a particular subject matter, to get a sense of the depth of the problem.
Yep. So basically, you put in the spec. You ask for the personas that would be involved in defining the spec.
Mm-hmm.
Then you try to increase those personas based on what you think is missed, and then you practice interviewing to some of those specific personas, that and get their feedback, and then you can start practicing what questions to ask and seeing how the feedback comes out. You can practice trying to tighten up feedback, and
Mm-hmm.
then you can bring some of that feedback with you when you interview somebody live, so that you can see any holes that they might have had that would strike their minds.
Right.
Oh, I did forget about that. I did. Oh, I didn't think, because part of your interviewing process is hopefully get them thinking about other areas that they hadn't thought about before, but that are impactful to them.
Right. And when you do this to a number of different personas of the same role or across different roles, and you start to see certain commonality, you might recognize, okay, those are going to be the hot areas that are going to provide the most value, or
Mhm.
these are going to be areas that I probably want to drill into more. Now, of course, in doing all of this, you're going to realize that the agent is only working with the information that it has.
Yep.
Okay. And typically, when you go in and you ask what we call a zero knowledge question, in other words, if you ask a question without having provided any information to the agent. So, for example, if I said, give me some different personas of people working in a coffee shop, and you provide no background to that whatsoever, that's called a zero knowledge question. It's only working on the public knowledge that it has available.
Yeah.
As you continue prompting, you start adding more knowledge in that particular chat thread, and it
Yep.
begins to personalize for your particular needs. Um, Now, you may find that the answers you get are in line with the real SMEs you have. You may discover that your real subject matter experts have a totally different set of priorities from what the zero knowledge agent has, right?
And I think they would, because everybody's special. Everything has different. That's too generic.
Exactly. And even if you're working on something where, when you pose to the agent, tell me about, oh, I don't know, let me, you know, aligning a beam in a proton therapy machine. Okay, this is not something that is like all over the internet. You might get things that are useful. You might get things where it's like it's very different from what your own subject matter
Yeah.
experts tell you. So I would actually take the interviews. If you do interviews of a particular SME, let's say I say, okay, you are, a medical physicist who is responsible for aligning the beam before therapy. Okay. And
Hmm.
I go through some questions. Okay. I would take that and I would actually give that to Dr. Smith, who is the medical physicist, who is responsible for that. I'd share that interview only because of the fact that, number one, medical physicists, they like to tell you when you're wrong. You know
Yep.
what? Next best thing to being told you're right is being told you're wrong, because
Yep.
that's where you're going to learn things. Okay. So not only does the interviewing using a, an AI agent, not only does that help you practice the interview, not only does it help you sharpen your knowledge, it also provides you a bit of a counterpoint um, by which the real subject matter experts have the ability to evaluate
Yeah.
what they do versus kind of
What the
what's
bot was
considered
thinking.
to be typical in the industry or not known
Yeah.
out there.
Oh yeah, there's a couple new ideas that they can consider. I was that, and that's partly what I was hoping for when that process came through. Was there
Mhm.
a unique idea that I hadn't seen before for some of those solutions?
Yeah,
And the more data you get in a specific area, you might get something very unique.
right. The important thing here is that we have accelerated the process.
Yep.
In probably 15 minutes worth of interaction, um, we have learned a lot more about the coffee shop process than we would have done in a traditional
Yeah.
um, one-on-one interview.
So much more preparation for the BA to go in with much tighter, more concise questions, given the detailed knowledge they have based on the personas and the generic persona engagement.
Right.
All right, Mark, any last statements? Let these folks get back to their lives.
Well, you learned my final question really, really well,
That's right.
and which I am going to say not at this time, other than join us again for our next one of these
Hey,
sessions.
AI. Hey,
That's right.
AI. Thank you all. Have a great one. Bye bye.
Thanks a lot. Take care.